Good evening, everyone, and thanks, Jacinda, for the introduction. So today, blood clots have really captured the community's attention, particularly with COVID-19. But even before the pandemic, blood clotting was a major issue in heart attack and stroke, where blockage of key blood vessels leads to oxygen deprivation. Or in life-saving medical procedures, where medical equipment is used to support the heart and lungs, but this can lead to the activation of clotting proteins. Or in hospitalised patients, where thromboembolism, which is a complication of blood clotting, remains amongst the leading causes of preventable death in Australia. In fact, in each of these conditions, thousands of lives are cut short every year. And for thousands more who survive, they're often left with significant health impacts that limit what they can do for the rest of their lives. Now, with these sorts of numbers, this might have happened to someone that you know. And for me, that was someone in my family. So my grandfather had been taking a common anti-clotting medication called warfarin for many years. But one day he was hospitalised with internal bleeding, which was a problem because his medication was interfering with the normal clotting response. So he was given treatment to reverse his medication. But within a few days, he suffered several strokes, which his medication was originally intended to prevent. Now, fortunately, he's doing reasonably well, but his mobility and speech have been affected, and he can no longer live at home. And this really brought home to me how difficult it is to treat blood clotting. Indeed, managing blood clotting is not straightforward. And the reason for this is that blood clotting is the same vital process that's needed to stop blood loss after injury to a blood vessel. So, how do we treat the problem of blood clotting that leads to disease without creating a second problem that affects clotting after injury? And the short answer is that with existing treatments, we simply can't. Despite more than half a century since the first anti-clotting medications were introduced, there are still no treatments that only target blood clotting and disease. We want to change this. So we thought we need to approach this problem from a different angle, and we need to think about different targets and different molecules. So the target that we're working on is a protein called factor 12. And several years ago, researchers in Germany and the United States showed that switching off factor 12 could protect against clotting that causes heart attack, stroke, or thromboembolism, or occurs in medical procedures. But remarkably, switching off factor 12 had no effect on clotting after injury. And this, for the first time, suggested that it might be possible to produce new anti-clotting medications that only work in disease. So to search for molecules that could switch off factor 12, we turned to plants. And plants have proven to be an incredibly valuable source of commodities for human health. Their origins in traditional medicine can be traced back thousands of years. But perhaps what is less known is that a number of pharmaceuticals that are widely used today also derive from plants. And this includes aspirin and the chemotherapy drug paclitaxel. Now, Australia is really blessed with extraordinary diversity in plant life, and we live in a land of extremes, from lush tropical rainforests to arid outback country. And each is home to unique plant life that's not found anywhere else on the planet. However, Australian plants are largely untapped for medical applications. But we believe that some of the future solutions to our current health problems might already exist somewhere in our native plant life. All we need to do is to go out and find them. So following this line of thought, we found a molecule that could switch off factor 12 in the seeds of a tropical fruit that grows in northeastern Australia. We then worked with colleagues in Japan to produce newer versions of this molecule that have even better activity and are even more selective. We then tested our best molecule in clotting assays right here at UQ, and we showed that it was extremely effective at switching off disease-related clotting. But what was also exciting was that we showed that it doesn't bind to any other clotting proteins, including those that are essential for clotting after injury. And this really is the key point of difference that separates our molecule from all existing medications. So just this month, we filed a patent on these molecules, and we're very keen to progress this work. But the reality is that as the work advances, so does the cost. And unfortunately, this type of work that fills the gap between making a new discovery and possible clinical trials really has limited opportunities for funding from the government. So we thought we'd turn to the community to help us take this work to the next level. Already, we're working with clinicians at the Prince Charles Hospital to plan out what we need to do next. And this includes new assays where we can test out our molecules in real-world clinical applications, and other experiments where we can study the pharmaceutical properties of our molecules further so we can start to think about dosing and formulation. We're aiming to raise about $25,000 for each of these two areas, and we're hoping to complete this work in the next 12 months, by which time we should be in a really great position to talk with industry about how we can take this work closer towards clinical trials. We see this as an exciting opportunity to put Australian research, innovation, and our rich biodiversity on the world map. And as our molecules derive from plants, our longer-term goal is to see if we can adapt plants to produce our modified compounds. And this concept of plant molecular farming is something that's really taking off around the world, particularly for the production of biopharmaceuticals. This possibility is something that I'm working on with my colleagues here at the IMB.